Just a weekly reminder not to take yourselves too seriously and to take a deep breath, sit back, relax, and have a laugh with us. When people think about the University of Kentucky, they think about the wins, the banners, the moments. But this episode, this is about everything you didn't see. We're kicking this episode off with UK Recaptured. And for me, that story doesn't start in Lexington. It starts in limbo, waiting on paperwork, waiting on approval, waiting to officially leave the United States Military Academy and take a chance on something completely new. And in that waiting period, my entire life felt like it was up in the air. I was about to transfer as a junior, live off campus for the first time, in a city I barely knew, with people I've never met. So naturally, I did what any college student does. I went roommate hunting. There's this app called RoomSync that was recommended by Angliana. Not a person, but the apartment complex I'd signed the lease for. I know, what a strange name. It's basically a knockoff dating app, but for roommates. We answer all of these questions like, are you an early bird or a night owl? Do you like it hot or cold? Do you have any pets? Do you smoke? How should your roommate respond? And on and on and on. I know that people say that opposites attract, but for me, I was looking for someone who had the same exact answers as I would, which would be that they're a night owl, that they like it hot, and that they don't have any pets just because I don't know how cleanly they are, so I'm not sure if they're actually going to clean up after their pets' messes or not, and that they should not smoke because it smells absolutely horrendous and is bad for your health. I thought, okay, this is perfect. This is how I'm going to find my people. Yeah, not exactly. So this was a failed experiment on my end. So maybe opposites do attract, but I'm not sure if I completely trust the outcome. So we're going to have to test that out a little bit more before, I fully face it. Anyways, my first set of roommates, let's just say we were not a match. But honestly, that experience kind of set the tone for my transition, because instead of finding my people at home, I had to go out and find them on campus, which was a little bit nerve-wracking because I was sure that everyone already had their cliques by then. And somewhere in the middle of all that, trying to figure out where I was going to live and who I was going to live with, I went to transfer orientation. I remember thinking, this is so different. We had a special orientation just for the transfers, which made me feel seen. At West Point, we really didn't have anything like that, at least not in the same way. The closest thing was the parade when we officially became a part of the long gray line. But this felt new. I went with my godmother. We made the hour-and-a-half drive down, and I left with a few knickknacks and a lot to think about. On top of that, we also got our very own iPad, Apple Pencil, and iPad case since the University of Kentucky is partnered with Apple. And honestly, this was probably the best part because I got the new iPads like the freshmen, so it had no button. Whereas everybody else in my class, which was 2024, they had the iPad with the button. So I felt like a really lucky gal, super fortunate. Was it essentially paid for tuition? Yes. But in my head, and with girl math, it was free. Because we also got something similar at West Point, except it was a Dell laptop, a monitor, and a portable charger. Anyways, once it became real, I started planning everything. My schedule, my classes, my life. I knew I wanted to still be an overachiever, so I took 15 credit hours. And I built my days around being a night owl, something I could not do at West Point. They forced me into being an early bird, and it was miserable. But now I have late mornings and early afternoons, just trying to make it all work. And once everything was set, I started spending most of my free time at the Johnson Center. Sometimes I'd even sacrifice dinner just to stay longer, playing back-to-back pickup games and grabbing a late-night snack instead. Shout out to Cookout. That's where everything started to shift. I was playing pickup basketball, pickup soccer, just being around people. And eventually, those people became friends. That's actually how Futsal Club was born. A few of us from those pickup games came together, and we built something that still exists today. And looking back, if I had gotten along with my roommates right away, I don't know if I would have been on campus like that. I don't know if I would have found my people the same way. That's also how I met Jada Walker, one of the guests from a previous episode, for those of you following along. And from there, things started to fall into place. I didn't have a meal plan, but sometimes my friends would use their guest wipes so I could eat with them in the dining hall after long runs of games. And I'm gonna say it, this might be a hot take, but I actually thought the food at the 90 was really good. Plus, we had free ice cream. I'm saying that right now with air quotes, but you guys can't see that obviously since it's not a video podcast. But you know what? Wait for season 2. Maybe we'll upgrade. But anyways, I say free in quotes because technically you had to pay for the meal plan and the guest wipes. But luckily I had kind friends that shared them with me, so I didn't pay for the meal plan or anything like that. But thank God, because free ice cream is dangerous. And if I would have had a meal plan, I would have probably also had the freshman 15 within the first month. So thank goodness I didn't have too much free ice cream. Anyways, I know that people complained, but coming from West Point, that felt like a gourmet experience. Now, I will give credit where it's due. The pastries at West Point, next level. That was the one thing they never messed up. But overall, this was different. This was the beginning of me actually finding my place in the sea of blue. And as I started finding my rhythm socially, I also had to figure things out financially. This was my first time actually paying for school. At the United States Military Academy, my tuition was covered. So stepping into the University of Kentucky, this was eye-opening. Now, I was fortunate. I was an in-state student, so my tuition was significantly lower. But even then, it was still expensive. And I think about this all the time, how we can all walk across the same exact stage, or in the same degree, and pay completely different prices just based on where we're from. That part never really sat right with me. But regardless, I made a promise to myself that I was going to pay for my education, which meant loans, and figuring out the rest on my own. So naturally, I started applying for jobs. And then I got one. Then another. And another. And before I knew it, I had 5 jobs in a single school year. And the crazy part, I said yes to all of them. I was working as an assistant teacher at the Child Development Center of the Bluegrass, a tailgate hostess for Rebel XP, driving the Wildcat, interning with Enterprise, and coaching on the side. Most of it really had nothing to do with my major, U.S. culture and business. But at that point, experience was experience, and income was necessary. Some of those jobs I genuinely loved. Working with the kids, super rewarding, minus the diaper changes. I will never miss that, especially the blowouts. But luckily, the teachers would typically take care of those. Being a hostess on game days, that was a whole different kind of fun. Football Saturdays, Keeneland races, and networking with people I never would have met otherwise. It opened doors for me later on. And then there were the jobs that just came and went. The Wildcat was eventually shut down and replaced with like 5-10% discounted lifts per semester. 5. Which to this day, I still think was a downgrade. Free rides versus paying anything? Yeah, I'll let you decide. But through all of it, I stayed working. Not just for tuition, but for rent, gas, food, and honestly, just trying to maintain some kind of life between it all. Even during the summer, when school slowed down, I didn't. I secured an internship with Enterprise Holdings as an MTI, which is a management trainee intern at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and helped coach soccer camps back at home. Because once I started, I didn't really know how to stop. And looking back now, that season of my life taught me just as much as anything I learned in the classroom. Senior year looked a lot like junior year, at least on the surface level. I was still grinding, still juggling 5 jobs, but this time, the jobs themselves looked a little different. The only job that stayed consistent was my tailgate hostess role with Rebel XP. Everything else was new. I started working for FedEx as a package handler because they offered tuition reimbursement. up to $5,250. And at the time, I was like, yeah, that's worth it. In reality, that was probably the only job I can confidently say I truly hated. And maybe it was the work. Maybe it was the environment. Maybe it was both. But either way, I stuck it out, got the tuition reimbursement, and left as soon as I could. At the same time, I started coaching locally with soccer shops, since the summer camps were over and this company did their coaching at elementary schools. I even started doing my private coaching sessions on the side. And that was really rewarding. Seeing kids improve, build confidence, it reminded me of why I love the sport in the first place. The opportunity also ended up connecting me to my future boss at the Carrying Transitions of Greater Lexington, where I got my first role in marketing. Now, it was definitely old school marketing, but experience is experience, and I was taking everything I could get. And remember how I said networking during my Revel XP job opened doors? This is where that paid off. I ended up landing a fall internship with Middle Ground Capital, a private equity firm. A lot of people there were UK alumni, and I actually talked about those game day connections in my cover letter, which I think helped me stand out. They consistently had tents with great food that they catered in, and offered, might I add, for the home UK football games. And I'm not gonna lie, that was probably my favorite job at the time. Free snacks, drinks, chef-made lunches, playing ping pong on breaks. It was a whole vibe. They even had a cryotherapy chamber, a masseuse come in once a month, and a gym. I mean, I was working at the headquarters, so maybe this was to be expected, and I just hadn't lived lavishly yet in my corporate era. On top of that, they had a yoga studio with a Lululemon studio mirror, a golf simulator, and e-bikes. The chef would even make dinner for you to take home to your family, but this meal did cost a little bit of money, unlike the free lunch. There was also an electromagnetic body sculpting machine. I think it's called like Wonder or Wonder Axon or something. It tickled, or sometimes if you turned it up too high, it might sting a little bit. So, pick your poison. An NOV breathing treatment, and a charging station outside for electric vehicles since they gave incentives to purchase EVs. Pet owners could bring their dogs in every day, and there was a cafe and a basketball hoop outside. I still think about it sometimes, maybe a little bit more often than I'd like to admit, but nothing beats where I ended up, because eventually that path led me to the Walt Disney World Resort, and free park access to any park around the world. Paris, France, Tokyo, Japan, Shanghai, China, Hong Kong, China, Anaheim, California, you name it. And being able to bring a few of my friends and family on those trips to make memories together, even better. Yeah, that's going to be pretty hard to top, not to mention the discounts in-store, online, and on dining. Now, all I need is a husband who's a pilot, and it sounds like a match made in heaven. And the cherry on top, the weather is amazing for most of the year, in my opinion. And when my pixie dust needs to be refilled, I just think to myself, who else can say that they've worked for the same company as Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodrigo, Joshua Bassett, and many other greats? We might not have shared the same spotlight in the same role, but I enjoy my little pixie dust and my cast compliments from the thoughtful guests while I make magic for them on vacation. Honestly, this could really stump someone on a 2 truths and 1 lie if you ask me. Who knew working for Disney was wildly possible? Anyways, academically, not too much changed. I was still taking 15 credit hours, still in my overachiever era. But the biggest shift, my living situation. I moved to a slightly cheaper apartment complex and gave RoomSync another shot. And this time, I struck gold. Or at least silver rather than bronze. I found some roommates I genuinely got along with, and that changed everything. Instead of constantly being on campus trying to find connection, I actually enjoyed being at home. I went from always being at the Johnson Center to becoming a bit of a homebody, only really going out on the weekends. And honestly, that apartment came with a whole new set of experiences. Now, when I say that apartment came with experiences, I mean that in every sense of the word. Buckle up, Buttercup. My life is a movie, and it's going to hit you like a freight train. Now, let's talk about one of the wildest things that happened while I was living at the stretch. Remember how I said this apartment was cheaper senior year? Yeah, I learned a very important lesson. Sometimes cheaper ends up being more expensive, and I mean that literally. Do I need to say it again for the people in the back? Good, because this is where my car got dinged and scratched. Not once, but twice, in this same incident. To this day, I still don't understand how someone manages to hit the front and the back of a parked car in one go. And of course, no cameras caught it. So, I guess we'll never know. Some of the cameras were facing the ground, other cameras were seemingly just for show and not turned on, and the rest of the cameras weren't even facing the right direction of the incident. How fitting. This never happened at the other apartment complex I lived in junior year, so I was really contemplating my decision making for trying to save a buck by sacrificing quality of life. Don't do that. Value your quality of life, please. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Learn from them. I walked so you could run. So what are we going to do? Right. Say it with me now. Not sacrifice quality of life, and that's on period. I thought that my luck couldn't get any worse, but nope. Within a couple of weeks, my foldable electric bike got stolen. And when I say this bike was a one of a kind, I am not exaggerating. It was the last model shipped to the US, discontinued, heavy, and basically useless without the battery, which I always took with me inside. So in my head, I'm like, there's no way anyone would steal this. I had a cover, an air tag, 2 locks. I did everything right. Lo and behold, one day it got stolen around 6 o'clock a.m. I didn't even realize it at first. I was driving to work at Kroger Field for the tailgate hostess job when my phone gave me that "you left your bike behind" notification, which was normal because, yeah, it was supposed to be at home. So I ignored it. Big mistake. Who would be up at the crack ass of dawn to steal a bike anyway, especially in a college student living apartment complex? Everyone is still probably hungover from partying too hard the night before. I mean, it was a Saturday morning after all. I guess maybe the same people who would be up this early getting hammered at 6 in the morning at a football tailgate. To my dismay, when I got back from work that afternoon, my bike was missing. But here's the part that still messes with me. The locks, still there. Locked. The bike cover, still there. Like they surgically removed the bike and left everything else behind to make me look like a mad woman. At that point, I'm like, yeah, no, we're finding this. So we knock on the only neighbor's door who has a sign outside saying, "Smile, you're on camera," to see if their Ring doorbell caught anything. Of course, their Ring camera was dead and it was inside charging. So we knocked on the surrounding neighbor's door hoping someone might have heard or saw something this morning. As I suspected, everyone is sound asleep because they were up late last night before gaming or doing homework. Time for plan B. My roommate and I tracked the AirTag down to where it was pinging, which was near the Zaxby's just down the street. We took our car so I could go in and ask questions. But they just took down my info and told me they'd call if they could get the camera footage from the drive-thru. Cool. More camera drama. So now we're circling the neighborhood, trying to follow the signal. And at one point, we hear a loud bang. And we look at each other. I don't know what that was, but we skirted out of there as soon as possible. Skirt, yee, yee, skirt. Sorry. We weren't trying to die over a bike. Then we called the police. And this part, wild. It took them 2 hours to respond because they were busy directing traffic for the football game. To be fair, having seen what I've seen at other venues, we do have some of the best traffic directing policemen out there because the cars are flowing like no other exit strategy I've seen. I mean, concerts, games, comedy shows, easy out. On the way in, not so much, but leaving is a breeze compared to other stadiums I've been to. Anyways, I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, what if this was an actual emergency? By the time the cops show up, we had just left to switch cars, and of course, that's exactly when they arrive. Immaculate timing. We explain everything, show them the AirTag location, and ask if they could check the house it's pinging behind. They basically tell us, no. So we've waited 2 hours for no reason. No search, no follow-up, Nothing. Just SOL. Shit out of luck for the newbies. So after all that nonsense, I'm on a $1,400 bike and stuck fixing my car with no one held accountable for any of the trouble. All because I tried to save a little money on rent. So yeah, let me say it one more time. Cheaper is not always better, because sometimes you end up paying for it anyway, just in ways you didn't expect. And the crazy part is, that wasn't even the worst thing that happened in that apartment, because not long after that, I learned another lesson. Stranger danger is very real. Yes, all of this happened within the first month of moving in. One of her roommates, I'll call her Regina, invited one of her friends over. So she was technically not a real stranger, but she was a stranger to the rest of us. For some reason, Regina brought her friend over to watch the basketball game when she was feeling under the weather. So her friend just sat on the couch in the living room alone while she stayed in her room recuperating. I tried to be polite by saying hi and introducing myself. Nothing. Just a blank stare. I asked if she wanted the fan on. A small nod. That was it. No thank you, no please. At first I was like, okay, maybe she's just shy. But as time went on, it started to feel a little bit off. Another roommate came out. We'll call her Gabrielle. Said hello. No response. Our final roommate came back from the store. We'll call her Rhonda. And asked a simple question about wanting the lights on or off. Nothing. No reactions, no words. Nothing. Just staring. So eventually, Rhonda texted me to come to her room. We're sitting there whispering under the country music Alexa's playing as a sound buffer, trying to figure out what's going on. And then, knock, knock, knock. Our hearts dropped. Because we were on the opposite side of the apartment. There was no reason for her to be near our rooms. We opened the door and it's her. And I kid you not, that the first thing she says is, I know you're talking about me. I don't have any weapons. You can check. At that point, I'm frozen. We try to play it off, but she just keeps going, saying people are always talking about her, that she hears them outside her window, and now we're realizing this isn't just awkward. Something is wrong. She eventually walks away, and we shut the door and lock it immediately. And now we're stuck in a weird position, where we're scared, but also know that she might genuinely need help. And the worst part, she's still in our living room, right next to the kitchen, where all the knives are. So that night, we barely slept. Every noise had us on edge. We were whispering, trying to make sense of it, freezing every time we heard movement. Eventually, things got quiet enough that we thought she'd fallen asleep, so we just waited it out. Morning comes, and we think, okay, maybe it's over. Knock, knock, knock. She's back, pointing at my room and asking for me. At this point, I'm literally hiding, trying to figure out what to do. Zoinks! I feel like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo right now. Eventually, I step out when the coast is clear, and she starts accusing me of being a witch. Not a bitch, you heard that right. A witch. Saying I can hear her from her dorm, even though I can barely hear her in the moment. Had I not been scared shitless, maybe I would have played along a little bit, get into character of being a witch. But no, there was no time for shenanigans. Apparently, I know her passwords to her laptop, and I'm recording her as she speaks. I mean, at this point, I wish I had been recording something, because I feel like this story is unbelievable. But luckily, Rhonda's listening to all of this through her shut door. I am dumbfounded and trying to calmly explain none of that is possible, and that I've only seen it in cinema. But nothing is landing, so at that point, I realize this conversation isn't going anywhere. So I ask her if she's ready to go home. She nods. So I go to Regina like, hey, your friend wants to go. Now. No delay, no discussion. And thankfully, she took her. But that whole situation, that was the moment I realized not every situation is just weird or awkward. Sometimes it's serious. And sometimes you have to prioritize your safety, even if it feels uncomfortable. Because safety begins with me. Once Regina got back from dropping her friend off, we knew we couldn't just ignore what happened. Regina also was feeling a little bit better and finally told us that they really only hung out at frat parties, so she didn't even know her that well, and they were more like acquaintances than friends. Either way, we tried to do something. We called the police, and they told us there wasn't much they could do unless someone was in immediate danger. So then we tried to call a mental health facility. And that's when we learned something else. Because she was over 18, she had to choose to admit herself, and we couldn't force anything. So the only option left was to try to help her want help. We had Regina call her and explain everything, and eventually, after some resistance, she agreed. But even then, it was clear something still wasn't right. When the doctor asked her questions, she would look at Regina to answer for her. And somehow, they initially said she was fine. And we were all like, no, there's no way. Later on, we found out she was actually admitted and diagnosed with schizophrenia, the same thing we had been quietly wondering about that night. And even after all of that, I still catch myself sometimes on campus thinking I saw her in a crowd. The whole experience just stayed with me, because it wasn't just a crazy story. It was real. And it reminded me how quickly something can go from uncomfy to serious. I do hope she's doing better now after switching schools and taking a break from studying, and has the proper help to get her through life. After that first month of pure chaos, things finally started to settle down. And once they did, I set a personal goal for myself. I wanted to experience everything, not just classes, not just work, but what it actually meant to be a part of the Big Blue Nation. So I made it my mission to go to at least one of every sporting event I could. Now, realistically, I wasn't buying season tickets. Between 5 jobs and school, that just wasn't happening. But whenever I had the chance, I showed up. Men's basketball was at the top of my list, of course. I grew up watching UK, so getting to see them play in person, under coaches like John Calipari and Mark Pope, that was special. I even happened to be friends with one of Ugana Onyenzo's. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, so I'm so sorry if I butchered it. But I was friends with one of his close friends, so we actually all went bowling one day at main event. And seeing him try to fit into my Honda Accord was laughable. His knees were literally still hitting the dashboard, even with his seat pushed back as far as possible. It was nice to see an athlete outside of their sport because they're just everyday people like us, except they just get recognized way more in public. And even when we didn't win, the games were close. The energy was there, and it was always a good time. Sometimes I went with friends, sometimes went alone. Either way, I was there. I didn't always get there early enough to be in the eruption zone with the student section, but at least that meant I could sit down and watch the game peacefully. The next thing on my list of athletic events was going to the UK women's basketball game, because I had some friends on the team that I grew up playing with, so being in the stands, cheering them on, that felt full circle. I even remember this one game during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. They wore these pink jerseys that were so fire. That moment just stuck with me. Soccer was another big one in my book. I went to both men's and women's games, and there's just something about a night match under the lights that hits different. I even went to a preseason game where I had friends on both teams, UK and Northern Kentucky University. And I was low-key rooting for everybody, even though I knew UK was probably going to win. And they did. Some of the other sports surprised me though. Softball? Way more entertaining than I expected. The walk-up songs alone had me locked in. And the only thing that could make it better was if it was a regular season game, so I could grab a snack in between innings. My classmate also pitched a hell of a game that afternoon. Our baseball team was so stacked that we mercy ruled Xavier University, something I thought was only a thing in high school ball. So I had to catch another baseball game to get the full experience and see one of my partners from class play. Gymnastics was another standout. Watching that level of precision and control in person and beating Alabama that night, yeah, that was a good one. We sent them packing back to Sweet Home Alabama. I even went to a volleyball game where we dominated the other team. It was the first volleyball game I'd been to since watching my roommate play at West Point, and it was refreshing to see an organized game of volleyball after taking volleyball class for part of the semester. Even just passing by swim practice sometimes on the way to futsal club training was kind of insane, since the aquatic center is connected to the Seton Center. Seeing the divers hit the water with barely a splash was like watching them defy physics in real time, over and over again, and I was here for it. Now, I didn't make it to everything. Track meets, golf, rifling, a few others. They just didn't line up with my schedule. But I still felt connected to all of it. One of my partners from class was a runner, and the other was a pole vaulter. So I was definitely bummed that all of our home meets were still off campus since our venue wasn't regulation size. I kept my distance from the golf course, but I didn't keep my distance from Topgolf, playing the Angry Birds mini game. Good grief, let me take a sip of water real quick. Gotta stay hydrated. Hydrate or dihydrate. I had my fair share of target practice at the shooting range at West Point, so I still got the gist of rifling. I might not have made it out to a tennis match, but I took a tennis class and finally learned how to play the game properly. I even watched Challengers. A movie all about tennis with Zendaya. I didn't make it out to any of the dance, rabble-rousers, or cheer competitions, but I always saw them at halftime or on the sideline, so I didn't feel as bad about missing those. And football? Football was an experience. Win or lose, the energy was there. The "We are UK" chants, the crowd, the overpriced food was all part of it. But I will never forget that one game against Georgia. We were so close, and instead of going for it, we punted. We lost by 1 point when we could have attempted a historical field goal. That one hurt, but overall, going to all those games, that's what made it real for me. That's what made me feel like I was actually a part of something bigger than just my classes or my jobs. That was Big Blue Nation. And before we close out this episode, I want you to think about something. Wherever you're listening from right now, whether you're driving, walking, or lying in bed, think about a moment in your life where everything felt up in the air, where you didn't have a clear plan, where nothing felt fully certain yet. The chaos, the uncertainty, the late nights, the 5 jobs, the moments where I had no idea what I was doing, that was my college experience. Not just the wins, not just the highlight reel, but everything in between. Because the truth is, I didn't come to the University of Kentucky with everything figured out. I came in during a transition, in limbo, trying to rebuild a version of myself that made sense outside of the United States Military Academy. And somewhere between bad roommates and late-night pickup games and working 5 jobs just to stay afloat, I found something I wasn't expecting to find so quickly. I found myself. And not in some perfect picture-ready way, but in the messy, real, figuring it out as I go kind of way. I found my people. I found my rhythm. I found my place in Big Blue Nation. And yeah, it didn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looked like scratched cars and stolen bikes. Sometimes it looked like fear and uncertainty and situations I never thought I'd be in. But even in those moments, I was growing. I was becoming. And I was building a life that, at one point, felt completely out of reach. And now, I'm sitting here having lived it. From UK to the Walt Disney World Resort, making magic for other people, while still chasing my own dreams. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of it, it's this. Your path is not always going to make sense while you're in it. It's not always going to be clean. It's not always going to be comfortable. But that doesn't mean it's not working. Because sometimes the most defining seasons of your life are the ones that feel the most uncertain. So if you're in that space right now, where you're questioning your next move, or nothing feels fully secure yet, ask yourself, did you stop? Or did you keep going anyway? Because you might be closer than you think. And when I look back at my time, transferring, rebuilding, working, struggling, growing, every risk, every setback, every unexpected turn, it didn't just shape who I am. It's still shaping who I am becoming. So, wherever you are in your journey right now, keep going. This is what becoming looks like. This was UK Recaptured, and that's a wrap on Season 1 of the Collegiate Chronicle. I'll catch you in the next chapter. That's a wrap for this episode of the Collegiate Chronicle. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you got a good laugh, learned something new, or maybe just felt a little more prepared for whatever college throws your way. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Got a wild college story or a topic you want us to dive into? Hit us up on social media or drop us a message. We might just feature it next time. Until then, stay safe, have fun, and remember, college is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. Catch you next time!